All right, so I am just setting up a couple things really quick on our stream, and then we will get started. Give me just 5 seconds here to make sure that the stream is live, because it's been about a month since my last stream, so I want to make sure that everything's working here. If you don't know, my name is Ben. I go by Polygon around here. We're going to be doing a hair demo tonight in ZBrush, and we will be getting started on that in just a moment. I recently, there we go, cool, I think we're good to go. So I recently did a character in collaboration with Nadia Axel. She's a really talented 2D artist. She does stuff digitally and traditionally. And she ended up creating a character design for me, and I ended up sculpting that character, and that's what you see in front of you. Her name is Diabolosa, and she's a demon. It's her OC. Right now she's dressed as a witch. So I recently released a video over on my YouTube channel, wherever that is. It's just Polygon. I'm Polygon on everything. Showing the entire process, kind of giving some tips, tricks, explaining my process along the way. You guys get the idea. You guys can check that out if you're interested in it. Just Polygon on YouTube. But essentially, I had a lot of people asking me about the hair for this character. So I thought it would be cool if during our return to the live stream here on the Pixologic channel that I would do some playing around with hair tonight. So I am going to show you guys, and I'll hide that image for now. We'll talk about that in a second. That's actually going to be the hair that we create. But I will show you guys my process for how I created this hair and kind of how I tackle most hair, pretty much all hair. There are some exceptions for specific hairstyles, but for the most part, any of that like long flowing complexity, that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. If you are just now joining us, say hi in chat, maybe shout out where you're from, where you're watching from, in a coffee shop or whatever. Hopefully my chat is working, and we can go ahead, and I think maybe shout out one more thing here really quick, and then we'll get started. If you guys want to check out more of my stuff, YouTube channel, Polygon. Appeal Academy is my major course. Most of my students are located in that. But gumroad.com/Polygon, that's where you can get all my brushes, materials, blah, 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 blah. Check it out. It's on the internet. Gumroad.com/Polygon. And then my art station if you guys want to see some of my stuff and you've never seen me before. Cool. Let's do it. So, hair. Hair is a pain, right? If you've ever tried sculpting hair, it kind of sucks. You can also get into a really nice Genova Chen-esque flow with sculpting hair, though. So there can be kind of like this big feeling of, oh my god, I'm never going to reach the end of this. But while you're in the middle of it, you kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm, right? If you've never sculpted hair, then you have no idea what I'm talking about. And maybe you can learn some cool new tips tonight, whether you are experienced in hair sculpting or not. So like I said, I had a lot of people asking me about how I created this hair. And we are going to be sculpting. I'll be turning off the hair for this character. And we're going to be giving her a new little hairstyle, a new haircut. So I will be... I think I'll be okay to keep this in here. I was thinking about maybe deleting it just because the file size would get a little bit too large. But we'll stick with what we got. So here's her current hair. There are a couple things that are missing. There we go. A lot of this is kind of roughed in, some of it more towards the front to kind of match the silhouette of the concept, which you can look up on Nadia Axel's Instagram or her YouTube channel. You can kind of see how that kind of fits that a little bit more closely. So a lot more attention paid towards the front. But let's go ahead and start the demo using this image over here. And we're going to hop on over to Photoshop real quick. And if you look through my subtool list, you can see how many different subtools I have for the hair. Actually, let's turn that on just so we can inspect what we have right now. So I kind of have this larger chunk representing just the top. This was combined from a couple different things, mainly modeled from a sphere. We have a lot of distinct individual flyaways, which is something that we will talk about a little bit later. Just kind of a quick little chunk of hair in the back to represent that quick little bun that the character has. And then all the rest of these subtools are the individual strands that you see represented for each of these. Some of them a lot larger in the back because I didn't want to take a ton of time, obviously, with too much of this stuff that would not be seen. Cool. So let's hop on over to Photoshop, maybe check out chat real quick. Night Shadow, what is going on? Welcome to the stream. Robert, hello from Las Vegas. How you doing, man? And Night Shadow says that they like to use the orb crack brush for sculpting hair. I believe I have the orbs crack brush in here. Orb cracks, there you go. I don't even remember what this brush does. I assume it's similar to a damn standard if I remember right, yeah. So I think that's a great brush for getting some basic volume. We'll talk more about that here in just a moment. So let's go ahead and hop on over to Photoshop, like I was saying. And essentially what we're gonna do is do a little bit of a breakdown on this hairstyle and start creating it in ZBrush. So if you guys are interested in sculpting hair, love it, hate it, either or, don't care, hopefully you'll find some helpful stuff along the way. Feel free to ask any questions in chat while I go, because I will not give you a moment of pause to ask any questions. I will just keep talking. So LMS, what is that? What does that mean, huh? Large, medium, and small. So this is a very simplistic fundamental concept to help you break down form. I use it all the time when I am doing draw-overs, or it's kind of always floating in the back of my head when I am sculpting. So if you're familiar with sculpting at all, you probably understand the basic concept of starting with large shapes first and slowly working towards the details. You don't want to start with a really simple shape and don't not spend any time getting that accurate, start throwing details on it right away, because later on that shape is probably going to need to be tweaked and changed, right? So how can we look at this for our hair? So let's start off with the large shapes first and try to break this down and make it a little bit easier to understand. So L, large. So let's look for the large chunks of hair. Let's go ahead and just outline these really quick. We have this one large segment coming down here, and this does kind of split here. You can see how that splits a little bit through there. We're not going to worry about that yet, though. We're just going to outline kind of this major wedge of hair. And I'm not going to spend too much time making it perfect. We'll just do it nice and quick here. Get another one of these little segments. See how that kind of flows down through there. So we have so far 1 and 2 kind of these larger segments, and we'll start to break those up a little bit more in just a moment. And obviously the crown is in the way, but we probably have some kind of like little hair part up there, and the hair splits in some form or fashion up through there. I'm gonna just outline the larger shape of what we're looking at. There's a lot going on over here. It's a little tough to kind of see and make out exactly what is happening, but for the most part, from what I can tell, this is the major, what would it be, convex ridge poking out towards the rim of the face. You can see it a little bit better right here in this side image. So everything within this area is kind of depressed, and there's a bit of a negative cavity there. So that is the major kind of separating line there. So it's very important that you spend some time with your hair and just take some time to outline it and really understand exactly what you're looking at. From there, we can start to break that down a little bit more. I'm just gonna try to alpha that out a little bit, and we'll grab this next color and start breaking things down a little bit more. So this is really helpful for me, and just not only with hair, I actually do this on a lot of characters, especially if I'm having trouble figuring out some form. What I like to do on occasion is also do a little bit of a draw over of some topology to help you kind of figure out some of the shapes. Like for instance, in the face, maybe we have this ridge flowing up from the nose up around the brow, and we can see exactly maybe like how that would connect, and you can maybe draw some geometric kind of planes for exactly where that needs to flow, and that can be very helpful. I find that to be very helpful, at least. So maybe that's something that you can try here with your hair as well, but in terms of kind of splitting this up a little bit more into our medium shapes, this is anything that starts to break up your primary form. So for instance, I mentioned those that kind of split shape down through here, which is kind of splitting all of this larger chunk into these smaller segments. We'll start to recognize these a little bit more. Same thing kind of happening over here. There are some smaller chunks, but we can see that there is actually some additional form happening here. One thing that's very helpful when looking at this kind of information is understanding the highlights and shadows that you're looking at. So for instance, on the side of the hair, we can see that there's a highlight. On the opposite, we see a little bit of a shadow. So we have this ridge right here that's flowing all the way through this hair. That is a nice convex line. Nice and sharp convex line. It's pretty sharp. We have some additional form up through here that we can kind of outline really quick. And we'll look at how we can use something like this in ZBrush. And then over here, of course, we have, up top, some more additional hair strokes. And we'll just kind of sketch those out real fast here and outline them. Just some simplistic stuff. And then we'll talk excuse me, about small shapes very briefly. And then we'll hop on into Z-Town. All right, so what are small shapes? Small shapes typically do not affect the silhouette, but I would say that our little flyaway hairs that you see here, these little guys, these are what I would definitely call silhouette effectors, but they're not really something that I would call a medium shape because I'm not really a huge fan of working on super small flyaway hairs while I'm in the process of working on larger and medium shapes. It's kind of just kind of like a final little touch thing. I pretty much try to save flyaways till the very end. I also find that they are kind of in the same vein of like putting a highlight on an eye. It really helps things come alive and feel a lot nicer. There's also some like little sketcherly strokes to the hair that we could maybe add at this point. You can see some of those flowing through here, but that would be the stage at which I would start to do that as well. So any of these like little tiny additional textures or anything like that. So that's the basic idea of working with large, medium, and small in kind of just like breaking down the shapes. So how do we actually apply this in ZBrush? So let's hop on back to ZBrush, take a look at our hair that we have currently, and then we'll talk about this hair here as well. Strange time to stream for you. No, I normally stream at this time on Tuesdays. It's just that I haven't streamed in probably a month or so. It's been a bit for sure. So I'm coming back from having a crazy bit of travel and work all at once. So I have time. I have time to stream again. So let's see. So with our hair currently, we've kind of already looked at this, so let's maybe not talk about that anymore. Instead, let's get in on our new hair and how we can break this down using this as a reference. So what we want to do is start with our large shapes first. So we pretty much have this one large shape here. So we got 1, 2, and 3. And we can kind of connect up some of this. There's also some information in the back that we can't really see, so we're gonna have to interpret some of that a little bit. But let's go ahead and start getting those major shapes here first. So how are we gonna do that? Let me see. Where would we like to start? I'm just gonna make this a little bit easier for me to navigate through all these different subtools. Let's go ahead and append a sphere. So if you guys are kind of new to working with hair, there are a lot of different ways that you can go about starting to block out shapes. One way that I like to work with blocking out form is just starting with a sphere, starting to kind of manipulate it into the form that I need. In this case, I think that I am just going to use a curve brush. I'm going to use a default curve brush just so you guys have the exact same tools that I'm using here. I'm going to be using the Curve Tube Snap Brush. A very nice curve brush. I use it all the time. And let's go ahead and start getting in some of these hair segments. So let's just draw one of these on here. And your first initial stroke does not need to be perfect. It's actually, in my opinion, better to keep things a bit messy at this stage. To kind of illustrate that point, even though this isn't exactly what I want, I'm just going to keep it. I'm going to use what I have. So we can have this geometry and start manipulating it with our move brush. So we can just start kind of pushing and pulling, twisting, yoinking. Yoinking is a very technical sculpting term. It means to move wildly or something. So we got that coming up over the ear, and maybe the long pointed ears aren't great for this hairstyle, so I think I'm gonna turn off the ears so that they aren't poking through. There we go. I'll just toggle those off real quick. Oh, let's get the earrings as well. Make it a bit easier to work on this hair. Let's see. It is not a hair study. We are more so just doing maybe a hair study for you guys. An illustration, a demonstration, hair demo. So we've already kind of talked about a little bit of large, medium, and small and what that means for this hairstyle and how to break form down. If you guys are joining us a little bit late and haven't seen anything like this before, no worries. Everything gets uploaded to YouTube after the stream is done. Let me make sure that I didn't miss any questions here. Ah, yes, daylight savings time. That's the one. That's what's got us confused. Let's see. Yes, the stream titles are often messed up, but that is not a problem. I'm sure it's fixed now. Why not use hair geometry? This is geometry right here. Alright, so like I said, it doesn't really matter too much if that shape isn't perfect starting out, because we can always fix and correct that later. So let's go ahead and do that now. I like to use, if you got some really thin geometry that's like really bothering you, you could probably just inflate that really quick to get that up to the level that you need. Essentially what we're looking at is this large shape here. So if we hop back to Photoshop, we can see that that comes down in a straight line and then curves in on the outside, straight line, back behind the shoulder, and flows down and across. So that is what we're looking for. We want this back behind the shoulder and then flowing across. Now we also need the hair that wraps around the head. As I mentioned, we cannot see that right now, right? Because of our concept, it doesn't show the backside. So we'll have to do a little bit of interpreting on that for sure. So let's go ahead and fix some of that. Start to get that to loop in. And I'll just go ahead and continue to tweak some of this with my move brush. And you know what, I'll keep I wasn't going to keep a lot of these accessories and stuff on the shirt, but we'll just leave them for now. I think it'll be fine. And let's go ahead and start to get a couple more of these little strands. So to save time, I'm just going to duplicate this and mirror it over to the other side. And she is posed right now, so there is some asymmetry. I am going to ZBrush, and actually the hair over here is flowing behind her ear, so that is something that we will need to tweak. So we'll push that back a little bit. And you know what, maybe we can change the hairstyle ever so slightly so it's not quite doing that. For the back of the head, we can either, move this stuff around, combine it with other geometry, sky's the limit. I'm just going to continue to repurpose what I have because it's in the scene already, and I'm too lazy to draw on additional curves. So we'll just kind of grab this and manipulate it to about where we need, and that's fine. Like I said, it's probably best to keep your geometry a little bit messy at this stage because we don't really have our main shapes down, and we're not really trying to keep our geometry super clean just yet. but we will, in a moment, want to clean that up. I'm using the IMM primitive brush to just insert a quick sphere, scale this up, just to create the top of the head for the hair. Actually, here, you know what? I'll delete this because I'll show you a different trick that I like to use. This is a bit easier when you have symmetry enabled, but because the head is kind of tilted and tweaked here, it's not really going to work, so I'll just kind of eyeball it really quick. But I like to create a mask and extract the hair from that to kind of get a basic idea of the hair that needs to kind of be topped. A little bit of the shorter hairs around the skull. I used to call it, I can't even remember now. It's my hair mask. It's really not important. I'm just getting that basic shape. I also realized that I deleted some of the stuff on the back, so that's fine though. So what we're gonna do after we have our mask is just duplicate our head and throw that down to the bottom. That is extremely high poly. Let me step down and delete subdivs then. There we go. So I just want this. This is all I want here. It's this piece of geometry. Scale that up. And now we have kind of the base of the head there. Pulled out just a little bit. So we could give that some thickness. We could play with that in many different ways to give it some volume. But for now, let's just continue on and get the rest of our form in here. So let's see. Let's kind of close up the huge gap that we have at the back of the head. And you know what? I'm just going to use this geometry. I deleted what I had before, somewhat on accident. So we'll just kind of do this really quick. So like I said, many different ways to continue creating lots and lots of geometry. And mainly, all I've been using this entire time is the move brush. So nothing super crazy. All very simple. So right now, all we are doing is focusing, for those that are just joining us, on the large shapes of our hair. So what are the large shapes of our hair? They're everything outlined in red here. So anything that is within this super large shape over here is kind of additional piece that kind of curlicues around, and then the other side of the head over here. So that is our objective, create the most basic shapes first, and then we'll start splitting that up a little bit more into some secondary shapes. This is quite a bit shorter on the other side. More so, I think it's just kind of tucked into her outfit. So it's a little bit harder to get a read on exactly what is happening over there. So what I will do is ZBrush this piece of geometry that I'm working on, just to get it really low poly, make it a little bit easier to manipulate and work on. And actually, before I do that, let's combine it with the other side. So we're just gonna make this one giant, large chunk here. And actually, I'll even move them just a little bit closer. Because my Dynamesh, because of the scale of my figure, my low Dynamesh here was a bit higher than what I anticipated, so we'll just kind of lower that quite a bit. And like I said, messy is fine, especially low poly geometry is fine. Makes all of this quite a bit easier, actually. And as for this up here, how that blends into the base of the skull, not important, because that is something that we will correct as we start to work on this and sculpt it and give it a little bit more form later on. So we just want to focus on that big shape. So what do we got? We got some gaps going on back here. Let's kind of cover that up. Let's maybe just sculpt on this just a little bit so it's not quite as thin, so Dynamesh doesn't give us any holes. That's never fun, right? And we will start to kind of work on our silhouette now. So we have some geometry representing the form. What do we want to do? We want this to be straight and then curve in. So straight, then curve in. We also want it to wrap around the shoulder. It's also another important part of what we can see happening here. So that means that it comes out a bit wider here, and then tucks in like so. Then we have that piece wrapping out and around and doing a little bit of a curlicue. So we'll start to do that next. And because it's a little tough to see, we'll just hide that temporarily. Give us some volume. Let's see. What mouse am I using? I have a Razer mouse, but I do not sculpt with my mouse. I have a Wacom Cintiq 27. It did look like a puppy, yes. It kind of looked like it had some ears, right? Yes, I sculpt with a mouse hidden from the camera. Tentacle monster, now that could be cool. Yes, backface masking is how I was sculpting on that without getting it to sculpt to the other side. I pretty much always keep that on for almost all of my brushes. A few I do not. Hannibal, what's going on? Welcome back, man. How you doing? All right, so we've started to get some extra volume in there. We're just gonna leave it how it is for now. Let's go ahead and grab our curve tube snap brush yet again, and we're gonna create this piece of geometry here that kind of curlicues out and around. I'm just trying to think how that would look for you guys this way. But we're gonna be doing something a bit different here. We're gonna be using the stroke menu with the curve tube snap brush. In here, you can see this curve modifier size button. We want to toggle that on and make our curve fall off look like that. And then we're going to draw a nice little curlicue, like so. Wow, that turned out great. Okay, let's try that again. Beautiful. That's exactly what we want. So we got it tapering down. We got it fitting mostly the right shape, right direction. I want this strand of hair to come up, down, and around. And then we'll kind of hide that in there. So the hair, from what we can see in this pose, is actually coming down and covering her eye a little bit. So that means that we need that to come more forward. So I'll just use a quick little mask, pull that a little bit more forward, and we'll push this a little bit more in front of her eye, like so. And then, kind of looking at the relationship between these two larger shapes, we can see that it's a straight line until it passes about 80% or so, 90%, and then it starts to like curve in there. 80% or 90% through this shape, this secondary shape. So we want to keep that relatively straight until that point. And I'm going to turn off the feathers on this character because they are getting in the way. A lot of things are getting in the way. I probably should have used a different character for this demo, but this is the character that I most recently did. This is the video that I had a lot of people asking about how I made the hair. For those that are just now joining us, actually I can show you the hair. Let me turn it on really quick. So this is the hair from the original character that I created in collaboration with Nadia Axel. But we're looking at the same process, just a different hairstyle. I had to find a different hairstyle, and I think this one is relatively simplistic. It fits essentially what we're going for here, but you never really know until you start getting in and working on something a bit more how well it's going to translate on over to 3D. So let's see. That shape kind of pulls out and goes around. And now remember that, as I said earlier, working with those larger shapes, it's extremely important that we spend a long time working on this stage to make sure that everything is kind of fitting the major shapes of the silhouette. Because what's going to happen is if we start to work on the secondary shapes and start to split things up into like individual parts, or start to make things a little bit more complicated, we're going to end up hurting ourselves a lot more later on when we want to make some large scale changes. Makes things much more difficult to like make big scale changes the more complex form that you have. So simple is easy to move around, whereas complex is not quite the same way. So let's go ahead and make a few more changes. I'm going to look at this just from some additional views to kind of get an idea of how I can maybe make that look a little bit nicer. Try to get a little bit more flow. It's a little thick through here. I'm actually okay with that. We'll probably thin it out a bit later. But let's start to manipulate this piece here, our little curly cue. It's not quite that long, so I'll just chop off the end really quick. It's a bit thin into about that point there. So anything past here, it starts to really start to thicken up quick. So we'll just grab a backface masking move brush and really start to thicken that up nice and quick. Now that curve is really nice and clean all the way through, so we don't want any major hits or breaks in the silhouette there. That line is relatively straight as well, so we'll just kind of manipulate that into what we need. It looks to me like that is not resting on the feathers or armor, so I'll just pull it off from the surface a bit more. There's also this larger ridge coming down, but let's just kind of focus on the silhouette first. We'll kind of get into that here in a moment. Maybe very quickly, you can take something like a damn standard brush or a standard brush or a number of other brushes and kind of carve in a little line here. Looks like there's some kind of additional form here. And I'll just sculpt on that with a quick clay brush. A few strokes, maybe a pinch. Yeah, that's fine. That's good enough for now. Let's do 50. Let's do like 100. Cool. With Dynamesh, because it's dependent on scale, I was pretty much just trying to find something that worked a little bit better there. So I just raised it up until I had enough geometry to retain the form that I was creating. So this strand is tucking up under this piece here. It's very important that we do that. So let's thin that out, tuck it under. So if we look at the shadow here, this whole shadowed area, right around here, make a new layer. Right around here. What that tells us is that the hair is obviously, starting to tuck up under here, right? But this is about where it starts to turn direction. So it's starting to get depressed in there. There's a concavity, which is creating that entire shadowed area. So it's important that we understand not just the silhouette of what we're looking at, line, that's very important, but highlights and shadows are equally important to understanding three-dimensional form. So that is something that we can start to tweak here to get a little bit closer to the shape of our hair. Now the problem with this hairstyle, the main problem that I think I will experience is trying to get some of this to work over here on the other side, because that is kind of tucked up into her her outfit, so it's a little tough to get some of that to work. I think we'll probably just keep it as is, just a little bit shorter on that side, and maybe we can play with and manipulate that a little bit more later to get that a little closer. A little bit of an inflate there. And that strand of hair is going into her cheek. We do not want that. Avoiding interpenetrating geometry is extremely important. Don't want that to happen. Let's push that back. It's because that is what we are seeing as that disappears into the concept. And yeah, okay, so let's start to move into a little bit of secondary shape, as well as continuing to clean up what we have, because things still look a bit awkward, right? But it's important to know during the early stage that what you're doing is not trying to make something look good right away. You are, that's always in the back of your head, right? But kind of like how a traditional sculptor would carve something out of a block of stone, you have to be able to see the finished product underneath all the garbage that you have right now. So what we're doing right now is we're doing construction, right? We're building the foundation. So it's very important that our foundation is strong, or else everything we do on top of that will not work out too well for us. I am going to do a couple things on this little chunk of hair up top, and then we can give it some thickness and continue on. Hello there, Mr. Polygon, or should I say, sup my boy? Yeah, we'll go with the latter. What's up, dude? What's going on? George, how goes it? Certain brushes, it should be turned on by default. I agree, absolutely. I think it should be on by default for like almost 90% of all brushes. I must have super strong shoulders moving the pen from side to side off of the screen. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but thank you. They're very burly. How can I control hair edge thin? How can you make thin edges for your hair? I recommend a pinch brush or a mech brush. Try out the pinch brush though first. See if that helps you out. Would you say a few key commands out loud if/when you are using them or switching tools? No, I will not. That would be just all I would say. I'm constantly pressing hotkeys, and yeah, that would not be fun. Let's see, anything else I need to catch up on? Any other questions before we continue on? It looks like I'm breaking through my webcam because I have some black stuff in the background. Yes, I'm breaking the second dimension, I guess. The third wall, not quite the fourth. Are your palms sweaty? All the time, yes. Fix your title! I can't. I'm not the official Pixo channel. I simply stream here. Alright, so let's go on here. I'm not seeing any other questions. I just did a quick remesh on this, so I could grab a Z modeler brush, extrude all polygons. I know I did that quick. If you want to know more about it, just let me know. And now we can start to merge and combine some of this stuff to make it a little bit nicer to work with as well. Let's see what our music is doing as well, because it looks like it stopped. Off topic, how do you make a border or picture frame on the border of, say, her dress? How do you make a picture frame on the border of her dress? I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, Hannibal. If you could maybe word it a little bit differently, maybe I'd understand a little bit better. Make a border or picture frame? Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand. How do you use curved tube? You click it and you draw it out like this. Boop. Curved tube. Beautiful. I use it all the time. Love it. Sculpting clothes that have overlapping parts. Oh, I kind of understand what you're saying. Vaguely. I'm not sure. Maybe I don't. Like this? Like overlapping clothes. Why is this so small? Like something like this? These are just all curved tubes. This is all done very quick and simply. So maybe something like that? Is that what you're talking about? That's all maybe not. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I probably am. The overlapping leather parts of the clothing need a border or frame. Could you link an example? I believe the Pixologic channel allows you to link stuff, but I'm not positive. If not, like, tweet it at me or something, and I'll take a look. I am very quickly just throwing a few quick strokes on this hair, just so it's not completely blank here. And I used the damn standard brush there really quick on this, but I pushed in way too far. I'll just fill it in really quick. I'm just trying to get a quick little bit of additional form there. So yes, all very junky, very quick, but what we're going to do next is still work on this primary shape. And I might turn one of these ears back on. It's just that they're so long and pointy. It's quite a bit different than what we have here. Let's just change the haircut, and we won't push it back. It's not changing the haircut, it's changing the exact shape. We'll just push it over the ear, kind of like what we have over on the other side. Okay, so we got some overlapping stuff here. I'm just going to combine all of that and Dynamesh it together because that's the quickest and easiest way to do something like that. You can see that I got some holes in my geometry. Normally I'd undo this and give it some quick extra thickness, but because it is a common problem and a lot of the times I know you guys can't do that, I'll show you another way to fix it. If you don't have your undo history, you can use the move brush with backface masking and just push around a little bit very quickly, just maybe something like that. Maybe push down and in, Dynamesh again, and voila, look at that. All your holes are gone for the most part. Maybe there's like a couple extra. But filling them back in and Dynameshing again will get rid of all that. So pretty easy to fix if you know what to expect from your results of Dynamesh. Now I'm just gonna blend between these. All very rough, right? We're still in that early blackout stage where it's okay for things to be rough. Giving her a crown would also help quite a bit in making this feel a lot closer to the exact hairstyle, but I don't think we're gonna have enough time for our demo, and I'd rather focus more so on just getting the hair done here. So I'm just adding in a little bit of extra information here on top of the head. Just some extra geo. Things are very messy. That's okay. I just need some extra thickness up top. And I was kind of blocking out with a quick Damn Standard-esque, or it's kind of like it's my sharp soft brush. I always say it's like if the Damn Standard brush and the standard brush had a baby, It's not quite as sharp as the damn standard, and it's not quite as soft as the standard brush. A little bit in between. Oops. All right, and then from the back, I'm just going to give that, with my move brush, a little bit of extra volume. Very careful to look at our silhouette here, see what's going on there. There's some unevenness, which a little bit is fine, but for the most part, I want that to be pretty close to what I'm seeing over there, which if we go back to Photoshop, you can see how nice and clean that rounded shape is. So that's definitely something that we want to correct here. Yes, Danny, you are most likely the only person who uses the Form Soft brush. Form Soft brush. I have no idea what the Form Soft brush is. I would guess that maybe it's up here somewhere, if it's still even default. I hate that they got rid of a lot of the old slash brushes. I think the slash 2 brush is still up there somewhere. I'm not positive, but the slash 2 brush, whew, if you guys haven't played around with it, I recommend. Highly recommend, especially for working on hair. I think it's great for working on hair. All right, so we have a very simplistic kind of shape here, but what's wrong? Well, it's just a little bit too high poly. It's a little bit too dense for what we're attempting to do. We've started to clean it up and play with the geometry a little bit, but let's go ahead and lower the poly count. I like to use poly groups if I can. So I'll be using keep groups over here and Z-remeshing that in an attempt to just make it a little bit easier to manipulate, as well as split up a little bit later. Have you seen the new tools coming on the ZBrush 2020 version? I have. I was actually one of the beta testers, and you can check out my images over on the official website. I'm the one who created the little dragon. I might actually have it here close by. This guy. This is what I created for the beta. There are a bunch of new tools, and if you guys are interested in learning more about ZBrush 2020 and the new tools coming to it, there is so this is my guy. That's what I created. Wow, so fancy. So nice. ZBrush Central. ZBrush 2020. Click on up here, and you'll find out about all the new cool tools coming in the new release, which is on November 12th. Wow, that's coming up soon. ZBrush 2020 will be a free upgrade for all registered ZBrush users. Yet again. Yay. As it always has been. But yes, this is my guy that I created for the beta. He's a lot of fun. I liked working on him a lot. Ooh, look at that. Our Z-remesh is all done. Wow, beautiful. Look at that. Perfect. Perfect retopo of hair. With the magic of Z-remesher. No, it is not. It is not perfect, but it will do the job for what we need right now. And what do we need? What do we need right now? Well, let's continue manipulating a little bit more, and then we can start to break our hair. Excuse me. Break our hair up a little bit more. I feel like I just had a mini stroke, and my throat is very dry, so I need another drink here. But I want to fix this first. You guys ever get like into a sculpting mode where you're like starving, or you have to go to the bathroom, or you need a drink of water, but you're like, yeah, just one more thing, and you do that one more thing, and then there's like another one more thing, and then that 2 more things turns into 10 more things, and then you're like just dying for a drink of water, like I am right now. That happens to me a lot, actually. I just get getting that flow, right? I'm just trying to give this a little bit more extra volume here. I'm just using a few clay tube strokes and hoping that that doesn't, whoops, turn on transparent, get too crazy there in volume. I think that's okay. I think that's fitting the silhouette fairly nicely. All right. Gotcha. When the hair was penetrating the skull. Let's see. Ah, I see. Yeah, not my style. Not my style of brush. I actually don't even use the standard brush really to sculpt all too often. I am not a huge fan of the standard brush for sculpting, but I will use it on occasion. All right, so I say we start going into secondary forms, which, if you guys were around at the beginning, is our medium shapes, our green lines here. We'll go ahead and turn that up, which start to break up our major shapes into our secondary shapes, our medium details, so to speak. So let's go ahead and start doing that and looking at how we can do that. There are a couple different ways. One way that I like to do this is by using the Curve Tube Snap brush yet again. Good old friend Curve Tube Snap. And we'll start to work on creating some of those. So let's duplicate our original larger chunk of hair, and I'm just going to draw out a stroke to show you what I have right now. So I have this turned on with size modifier in the stroke menu, stroke curve modifier size. So if I turn that off, it'll be even throughout. I'm actually going to keep that on, but I am going to pull that up a little bit and add in an extra point and try to get something a little bit nicer here. There we go. I'm starting to like that. Another thing here, if we can undo back, another thing that we want to try is to make this more thin. So if we come up here and lower our Z intensity, we can make that a bit more thin, which is nice. And one last thing here is under brush depth. I'm going to embed that just a little bit too. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. All right. So now we can start making some of these secondary shapes. So let's see. So if you're having trouble, you can just come back to your guide where you started to highlight some of those additional forms. So we have one kind of chunk here splitting up, another one flowing down here, and another one. And that all creates this first chunk here. So there are about 3 pieces that make up this whole piece. But it's nice to think of that as one chunk, mentally at least. So kind of 3 pieces that we can start to work on here. So we'll do 1, and we'll just tap to delete our curve. Maybe use our move brush and manipulate that a little bit. And we could have pulled that up maybe a little bit higher up here, but I think we're fine. We can just manipulate this with our move brush. And a little bit of masking as well. I like to turn on and off dynamic while I'm working so that I can just get an idea of what that'll look like once I start to smooth out the geometry. I'm noticing that that's a little bit flatter down there at the bottom. What I think I'll end up doing is combining these 2 major pieces and probably just make that separation between them a bit more distinct. So to do that, we'll probably just push this side in a little bit more. So essentially they're going to be creating an M shape if we were to look at it from this angle. All right, let's just grab our curve tube snap brush again and do the exact same thing. I'm gonna make this one a little bit flatter though. Beautiful. All right, let's accept that. And we have a nice kind of clear distinction between those two shapes, but we can spend a decent amount of time beginning to clean this up, make it a bit nicer. And let's just merge these together so we can look at them. We can even turn off our larger hair shape so we can maybe play with manipulating these to make them flow a bit better. All right, and then we have kind of that third smaller piece that's kind of just barely poking out there. So what I'm going to do for that one is just modify my size, whoops, here. And starting from about the eye down to there. Give us one of those. Increase our Z intensity, lower our draw size till we get something a bit closer to what's in the reference. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller than what is in the reference so that I can inflate everything, because the tips of that stroke were a little bit too small in my opinion. Let me put that back where I had it. All right. Now it's just a matter of cleaning that up. You can see that it's a little bit dense in terms of topology, poly count, right? Typically what I'll do in this kind of instance, if I want something to be hyper clean, I'll come through with a Z modeler brush, choosing to delete edge loop complete, and I'll just go through and delete a bunch of the edge loops, and it makes the geometry just that much easier to manipulate. So what I'm doing right now is deleting maybe about 75% of the geometry or so. Remember that the less polygons that you have, the easier it is to manipulate the form. And that was pretty quick. On some stuff it can be a little bit more time consuming if you're working with your topology to make sure it's hyper clean, right? But in this case, you know, that was a pretty quick and simple one. All right, so I'm gonna blend those together. I'm gonna start to feed that in there as well as down here. And there we go. We're starting to get somewhere. So with our larger chunk of hair, eventually we will just delete our larger chunk altogether and continue to work on our new pieces. That's why it's okay to keep this messy. We might want to keep some of this in there, depending on the hairstyle and what we're trying to create. Sometimes I will. Sometimes I'll also use it in a way where I would maybe just make a selection like this, and then I would turn this section here into one strand of hair. I would just split it off or extract it, right? Either way. So that's another way to work, but we've been having a lot of fun, I think, with the curve brush, the curved tube snap brush. So I think this is working pretty well here. So we'll probably continue with that for a little bit longer. Make sure we don't have any more questions before we start working on the next section. Yes, I am just using the hairstyle from this character on a different character that I just recently created. For those that are just joining us, you know what, maybe something that I can do is take this character with this hairstyle, her original hair, and put her up in the corner so I don't have to keep turning this on. So that is her original hair that I created using the exact same technique that we're looking at right now. So pretty simple stuff so far. we've really only used a handful of brushes, mainly being the move brush and the curve tube snap brush. That's about it. Nothing too complicated. So before I go on to making a few more of these hair segments, which we will do, let me just manipulate what I have so far. So I really want that tuck in there to be nice and clean. Get that in there. If things are a little bit too thick here, all we have to do is grab our transpose line and shrink that down, or our 3D gizmo, whichever you prefer. And I'm actually going to inflate that back strand like so. And I'll show you guys another technique. So I'm going to subdivide these pieces of geometry that we have so far, just so I can show this off. I'm going to be using the sharp soft brush that I have here. This is one of my custom brushes. It's available over on my Gumroad. It's a very simple brush, but I'll go ahead and show you how I like to use it here with hair. So I'm going to increase my draw size quite a bit, and very lightly, whoops, make sure I have the right brush selected, and very gently here just start to pull a stroke down here. Alright, and that looks a bit too large for what we're trying, but let's keep it for now. You can always soften that later. Alright, I think that works pretty well for starting to get some additional secondary form for these strands that we've created. So that works really nicely there, and I'll do another one right here. Obviously smaller on this strand. So we're starting to get some of those kind of soft, sharp edges that we really like to see in hair. Another cool way to intensify maybe some of those sharp edges is with a pinch brush. You can kind of carry that down and really get a nice sharp ridge on that. But from what I can tell, most of these shapes are pretty rounded, pretty soft. So this is a bit too exaggerated. So we'll just kind of smooth that out a little bit. Not enough to completely destroy everything that we just did, but just enough to kind of soften that. And if you guys remember me pointing out the M shape that we're looking for before, for what would be in between those two hair strands, you can now start to see that M shape. That wasn't a very good mask, but you can now start to see that M shape forming there. So that's starting to work out pretty well. So that's what we're looking for in that section. And from here, it's pretty much just repeating that process until we get the rest of this. But we have about an hour left, so I don't think I'm going to have enough time to hyper detail any of this. So I'm trying to think what we have enough time for. I think I'm just going to continue on with the secondary shapes. We'll talk more about details and flyaway strands probably when we have about 30 minutes or so left. Why don't you just copy the hair from that model to this model? Oh man. How do you make the hair curve tube snap flat again? You just, for any curve brush at all, not just that one, but for any curve brush at all, if you lower the Z intensity, think of that as a percentage of how thick or thin that is. So if you make it 50, it'll be half of its original thickness. So Z intensity. How was your Sculptober? I'm still working on it. Well, awesome, man. Every day is Sculptober. I agree. Hopefully the frame skipping on the stream isn't too bad here. Hopefully it stopped, or stops soon. But Sculptober was awesome. Thank you so much for asking, man. For those that are unaware, last month was Sculptober, October, Sculpting, right? kind of like Inktober or Sketchtober or any of those tobers. There's a writing one as well. I don't remember what it's called. I did not get to do every single day. I think during the last week, I did not end up being able to do pretty much any of those. I got slammed with just like a ton of work and travel that I had to do. But yeah, here's a few of my dailies from that. Here's this little, what are these things called? I cannot remember. Isopods. Yeah, he's cute, right? So all these were just done in about an average of an hour or so. I had a lot of fun working on all these. Blast. This guy was one of my favorite little quick doodles from the time. You can see that a lot of this stuff is like really simple and quick. Like his feet, they're just like squashed spheres. His pants are, you know, quick cylinders. Same thing with the sleeves and shirt. I mean, it's all like super quick, but a lot of fun. I had fun working on this little robot too. I had fun on all of these, but yeah, if you guys are still interested, this was also for my last day of Sculptober, which was the character that we're looking at right now. But yeah, if you guys are still interested in participating in Sculptober, you don't have to do it in October. It's more of just a month-long challenge, and the objective is to get people sculpting. Sculptober just happens to be conveniently a way to get everybody to do it at the same time. There's all sorts of other sculpting challenges as well, though. I am not the creator of Sculptober. I merely helped to facilitate it this year, and I had a lot of fun getting to participate as well. If you didn't get to participate, though, hey, there's always next year. Every day is Sculptober, though. I agree. It is for me. It is when it's your job. Alright, so we want a few more strands here. I'll continue working on these and just answering questions, and maybe, like I said, we'll be able to get some more form down. Probably get to some details here soon. Some flyaways. Flyaways are the most fun part, in my opinion, because that's when you start to breathe the life into your hair. Things really start to come together at that point. So if we look at that hair, you know, she's pretty much looking at us straight on. I'm making sure that I'm reading this correctly. This comes pretty far forward, more so forward than the these two strands, this inner part. So we definitely want that to come out further up and over what we have there. And then it hangs below and wraps down and in to that area as well. So there's quite a bit actually going on there. The whole objective here, though, when you are working on your hair, is to just kind of do it one at a time when you're starting to get into this secondary form stage, because you're not going to be able to really do more than that. If you do, you're going to start to cause more trouble for yourself, because the whole objective here is that we're starting to figure out the proportions more and more. And what proportions are being able to reference what you see against other parts. So you can't really figure out proportions unless you have some of it already in there. Kind of defeats the purpose, right? So it's very important that we get as much in as quick as possible. It's the exact same thing I do when I'm sculpting anything else. All the exact same strategy. That is having a lot of trouble there. I've kind of twisted it. Nah, it's fine. We won't worry about it too much. Alright, so with this piece, I think I will do the exact same thing with my sharp soft brush. Pull that down, get some extra form. It looks like it's a little bit more so on the back side, so if we can get that. And maybe push that in. I'm just using a trim brush here to push that in a little bit so I can move that edge. And it's totally okay if it starts to get messy. It is not the end of the world at this stage. I'll show you how you can clean up your strands, make them nice and simple again. So one cool thing that we want to pay attention to here is how the taper of the hair works. So for instance, it starts to get a bit thinner there, and then it like thickens a little bit at this one segment right here. There's a bit of a hit there. So these are little things that I really try to look for that help to break up the monotony of a strand of hair, just tapering all the way down and getting smaller. It just kind of makes it a bit more visually interesting. So, you know, it's not super messy, but it's too messy for me. So we could go back, lower our subdiv back down to subdivision level 1 where we started, but then we start to lose some of the form that we created here, and we don't really want to do that, right? We want to keep that. We want to keep the work that we did. So what I would do is just Dynamesh it, and then from there ZRemesh it. I will probably just do like 500 or so polys for something like this. I'm actually fine with doing this as low as possible after seeing what that looks like, just because I think we'll be able to retain pretty much all the form that we created there. Another really cool thing that you can do once you have some low poly strands of hair is you can start to manipulate the geometry with your Z modeler brush by using the crease and bevel functions. So for instance, a crease of an edge loop complete, as long as your geometry isn't too screwy here, which mine seems to be, we'll just fix it real fast so I can show you guys, and add in a couple creases and maybe delete an edge loop here and there. All right, so now we got this nice clean strand with these really tight, crisp creases that are very, very nice to have. Another way that I mentioned is that you can just bevel the edge, which is kind of like a manual way of doing a crease if you make it small or thin enough, but it's a bit softer. So I think you guys can see the difference. Super hard edge over on this side, a little bit softer there. I tend to go for the little bit softer. I'm not a huge fan of super tight creases unless the concept specifically calls for something like that. And then we can blend these into the top later, much like what we did with our hair that we extracted from the head. So pretty much exact same process. I'll also run a close holes operation on those because we had the open face geometry. Nobody wants that, right? Let's go ahead and talk about more processes here that we can do for secondary shapes. So, for instance, on that strand here, we have some additional splitting of the form going on. So it starts to get a little bit more complex. You could do that by inserting another strand of hair on top and kind of combining those and kind of working with that more. But another way is that we can just kind of sculpt that additional form. I like to use lazy mouse when I'm sculpting on hair because it's going to keep things a lot more clean. If we turn off lazy mouse, whoops. Oh wait, I want that down. No wait, yes, I think I want that on 0. So to make sure that we're getting some nice clean strokes, you might have a super steady hand, you might not. Lazy mouse is your friend. So we're just going to pull all the way down here. And if you're having trouble, you can increase your lazy radius even more. I typically keep mine below 100 because anything higher than that ends up getting kind of tough to control. I find between 50 and 100 to be a pretty good safe place to work. Another thing that's really important while working with creating additional form like this is that you want to focus on not having your brush be the exact same, or your stroke be exactly the same all the way through the length. So if you look down here, you can see that I didn't just kind of carve in and then stop and lift my pen up like this. So it's just got this awkward cutoff there where the stroke obviously stops. As it kind of fades out here, I slowly faded that brush stroke out. And that's what's really important about having a pressure sensitive pen when sculpting. Not just the fact that you have a lot more control with your hand, but also the fact that you can do some really nice stuff with pressure sensitivity. So for instance, if I did a positive stroke here, we can see the difference. So soft, strong, soft, strong, right? But obviously you don't want to do it like that. You want to kind of fade into it a little bit more. You can kind of fade that out. Whereas if I did that with my mouse, whoops. I mean, yeah, I can't even, here, like that. Oh wow, that looks great, right? No, we want something more like this. In this instance though, we don't really call for that. I just wanted to kind of break up that form a little bit more. Typically, if I don't get it, you know, absolutely perfect in the first stroke, I'll go back over it with a pinch or maybe a mech brush and start to clean that up a little bit more. Maybe soften the transitional ends with a quick smooth, and that really helps to make that transition even a little bit better there. But you can start to see how that starts to come together and feel a bit closer to some of the splitting complexity that we have there. And it looks like there's a bit more going on. That is definitely something that we'd want to do with these strands, as they are looking quite a bit flat. So maybe we can just come through with a quick, quick pinch or so down through here. And you know what, that one's fine. All right, let's go ahead and do some stray strands of hair over on this side so we can start to work on that. But I think I'll clean this up just a little bit before we do that to make sure that this segment or section here is kind of going through the whole process. Bean, great name. I'm sculpting every day, but the problem is like 3 or so weeks straight of sculpting the same thing. Well, like you're working on the same project for 3 weeks? I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I work on projects longer than that a lot of the time. You know what? If you're pretty new to sculpting, you know, just kind of understand that it takes time. It takes a lot of mileage to get up to that kind of level where you're going to be happy with maybe, or more happy with the amount of time it takes to create a certain result. I pretty much always say that the only difference between, you know, someone that has never painted in their entire life and someone that painted the Mona Lisa, or, you know, sculpted the David, or, you know, any famous work, right, is time. And not just, you know, the number of hours that you put in beforehand, but also the number of hours that it will take to do that piece like that one time. And the more hours that you put in beforehand, the less time it'll take when you go to do the new project, right? It's all about mileage. So it looks like this is a secondary piece coming down and wrapping around down to here, and I really like that. So I would like to copy that. I think that's a really cool way to break up the hair. I'm just kind of cleaning this up down yonder. Move brush plus AccuCurve, if you've never used it before. Great tool. It twists a little bit more, but I think we're fine with what we got. Let me create that next little piece, and then we'll do the smaller thing. Part of why I'm spending so long on each thing is because I'm looking for the most effective way to do something, as well as what looks the best. Yeah, maybe. I recommend just having a very clear goal of what you're trying to accomplish or why you're sculpting something. And the more clear your goal is, the, whoa, don't want that. The less time you have to spend kind of second guessing what you're doing, the more time you can spend just working and getting to that finished result. All right, that is basically what I'm looking for. It's not quite going in the right direction. Again, I'm going to make this one a little smaller, and then I'll scale it up with an inflate, just a little. All good things with time, though. All just takes time. It's the only difference between a rookie and a master. Just do it a lot. That's how you get good at hair. Just do it a lot. No secrets. But people don't want to hear that. Like, people never want to hear that you just have to do something a lot. That's why this new amazing diet always sells so well, right? Nobody wants the hard way, the right way. All right, that's basically correct, but it's a little too rounded, a little too thick. So I'm going to do the same trick that I did before, deleting my end caps. So that's the end caps on this, the end caps on this brush, the curve tube snap brush, are actually why I created my own curve brush. I have the Folly Cube tube. It's my favorite curve brush. The reason I'm not using it is because you guys have this brush and I don't want to use something that you guys don't have. I'll show it off very quickly, but those end caps are why I created that brush, because the end caps on this one are not super great. All right, this edge needs to come up. And like I said, with hair, really it just takes a long time to do. So I recommend grabbing some music. I typically listen to podcasts and just try to get into a little bit of a flow with it. And over time, the hours will melt away and you'll find yourself almost done with your hair. But we only have a couple hours for our stream tonight, so we're just trying to show off the whole process here as much as we can. So that's a bit closer, so I think I'm happy enough to just leave that as is. It's kind of like a secondary piece there. It comes down a bit further and this starts to thin out a bit earlier and do a couple different things, but it kind of gets the point across for what we need here. All right, so let's do some stray strands of hair. Stray strands of hair are often, I like to put them, if I don't have a great reference for how they work, I like to put them around the face to help create more detail and draw the attention to the face. You can see that the artist has done that up around here, a little bit here with the secondary piece. There's a little bit too much complexity, in my opinion, happening down here in both of these images, and it tends to draw your eye a little bit too much to that area. So I don't think this is a great example of the best way to do stray strands of hair, but I think they still look really nice. I think the hair is done beautifully on both of these illustrations. So we'll still keep them in the same place, but that's something that I want to mention that you guys can keep in the back of your head for when you go to work on your hair. So how do we create stray strands of hair? Wow, the curved tube snap brush again? Yes, again. It's our best friend for hair. Whoa, come back. We're going to do the exact same thing that we have been doing, just on a smaller scale. And I'll show you a technique that I like to do to make these even easier to manipulate. So we have one coming down this ridge here, and we have one coming down here, we have one over here, It looks like that splits, so let's say 4. 4, and then, you know, there's another one over here. So maybe like 5 on this side of her head. And what's important with these kind of simplistic stylized characters oftentimes is that you don't want to overdo this stylized hair. It's kind of, or these stray strands of hair, it's kind of like if you're typing out a message and you make everything bold or everything italic. If everything's bold, then nothing ends up being bold. So you kind of just want to have pockets of detail to help draw the attention, which is why it's nice to put them around the face, draw the attention of the face, right? So let's just draw one out here. Boop, 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 boop. Real small, real thin. Beautiful. Grab that. So the problem is, with something like this, is that it is nice and thin, it's simple, you know, it gets the job done, but the geometry is just so dense. There are 100 polys in this thin piece of hair, and that is just way too many. Like, there's just way too many edge loops in this, and as you notice, as I start to move that around with my move brush, it starts to kind of warp and get all crazy. So how do we make this easier to manipulate? Well, step 1 is to try to use Z-remesher to lower the poly count. So I just crank it down to 0.1, and you can see that that has done a pretty good job. We've gone to about 1/4 of the amount of polys that we had previously. And another technique is to use the Z modeler and just manually, like I showed you guys before, go in and start to delete some of the edge loops. And this is only something that I recommend doing if you are having a lot of trouble manipulating your hair here, or if it's something that has an extremely distinct curve or hit, and you want to make sure that that matches the shape that you're trying to create perfectly. I will oftentimes go through the process of doing this because it's never bad to do this. It takes time to do, but hair takes time to do, no matter what. But this is just so much easier to manipulate now. I can grab a nice big move brush and start to tweak and pull this around to create whatever shape that I need. So there is our first stray strand of hair, and we can maybe kind of blend that in up there so it starts to kind of come out of that shape, and it looks like it kind of connects down here. So something like that, right? But the more we add of these, the more complex we'll get. Let's duplicate that, mask, rotate, and scale, and get that little secondary offshoot. And that one even looks more thin, so I will use deflate. I'm doing this with the transpose line, but the inflate operation is a deformer. It's in your tool menu, deformation, and down here at the bottom, inflate. So you can just crank on that, whichever way you need. I'm just using a little bit of a hotkey. So there we go. We got a little bit of a thinner strand there, and we've started to create some of our secondary, or not secondary, but tertiary details, our kind of high resolution final coup de grace, so to speak. And of course we can start to create more of these and continue to complicate and work on the hair even more. What I would like to do at this stage, I'm kind of fast forwarding a little bit because we're running out of time with our stream, and I want to make sure that we can show off a little bit more of the process. But I would not actually at this stage start to work on the details. I would still be in that kind of secondary stage working on creating the rest of the hair. But like I said, because of time, we want to show off as much as we can. So I would still be working, wrapping slowly around the head, starting to create more of these pieces. And then after I was done creating all of those individual segments and different block out pieces, then I would probably remove the larger original kind of hair block out, or maybe pick and choose sections to keep and sections to remove, and then continue to work on the hair a bit more. But it's important that we show off the whole thing. So that's basically the process. I can continue working on this for the rest of the stream, and I probably will, unless we have any specific questions related to anything else. For those that are just joining us, this is a character by the name of Diabolosa. We just got through doing a bit of a hair demo. We're going to continue working, though, because we have about 30 or so minutes left. I am going to just create a quick extra folder to throw this all in so that I can show you guys the original, the OC, the original character without the new hair that we're working on for the demo. So this is the original character, same hair, same exact process. I think you guys, now that we've kind of gone through a bit more of the process, you can probably see how a lot of this was created. We just got done looking at some of those stray strands of hair, those individual segments, wherever they are. Here are a few of them. So you can kind of see how that works out with this character. As you can see with this one, a lot more of them are up and around the face. It is a little bit shorter, right, than the last hair that we were looking at, but with the intention of trying to draw detail and draw the eye up to that area. So same exact technique. Her ears are turned off. That looks a bit awkward, but that is it. That is the whole thing. We can continue working on it though. So let's go back. All right, make sure I didn't miss any questions here. Maybe you're not using perspective, or you're using perspective too much. So with perspective, while I'm sculpting, I will intermittently flip on and off between it. A lot of the time I actually keep it off while I'm sculpting, especially if I'm sculpting on something very close up, just because I find that perspective tends to cause quite a bit of issues with rotating your camera around from really close to your model. Another reason I'd turn that off is for the orthographic view, if you're trying to just snap to the side and make some large-scale changes. I find that to be very helpful. What do you do when you start feeling tired and sleepy, but not want to feel that way? Yeah, coffee, I guess. I think you answered the question yourself. I'm actually a big tea drinker myself. I love just coffee in general, like the flavor coffee. Like coffee flavored anything is like my go-to. But I'm also a big tea drinker. I don't drink coffee very often, but I do love it. Favorite tea, probably black chai or Earl Grey is pretty high up there. Oh man, actually the green tea is really good. I got hooked on green tea when I was in Japan, and yeah, I've loved green tea ever since. It's so good. All right, I want to create a few more of these larger segments, but feel free to ask questions as we go. If there's anything that's like completely off topic, feel free to ask as well, because really for the rest of this time we're just going to be kind of noodling. I meant to show you guys my cube tube brush as well, so I'll go ahead and show that to you now. The cube tube brush is a curve brush, much like the curve tube snap that we were using that whole time, but it is a tube. You can actually do this with the curve tube snap brush. You can change it into a cube through a modifier, a brush modifier, but it doesn't have the same geometry. It doesn't have the same exact clean topology that something like this would have. So for that reason, that is why I made this brush, and I love this brush. I use it all the time. We're gonna lower our depth. It's a great brush. One of my few favorites. Yes, black tea is so good. Specifically, black chai. Oh. The only tea that I had that I didn't like was some expired matcha, and it tasted good actually, but what it did to my body was not okay. Was much easier learning about using image planes to sculpt rather than using the spotlight tool. So you're talking about for references? Yeah, this is the spotlight tool. What's great about sculpting the way that I am doing it now is instead of just overlaying an image and trying to match things perfectly, which I do on occasion, especially if I'm really trying to hone in on accuracy. What's great about sculpting with just a reference image, whether you have it here or off screen or in your hand on your phone, doesn't matter, is that you're working on your eye, working on your artistic eye, your ability to recognize when things look wrong or right. And that is half of the work, right? In my opinion, it's more than half. I think your ability to see and understand what you're looking at is more important than your actual abilities as a sculptor. So obviously you have to be able to sculpt and have the knowledge of the software, the actual dexterity and know-how for working with that medium. But you also have to be able to see what you're doing. And that sounds like a weird thing when you say it, especially if you're not extremely familiar with any artistic medium. But just being able to recognize what you're looking at is extremely important, which is why I did this demo of a draw over to help understand the large, medium, and small shapes that we were looking at in this hair, because that's just so incredibly important in terms of pre-planning, in terms of what you're going to be doing later, and everything else. But yes, your ability to see. This is a good way to practice that ability. I would, if you're just doing a personal project and you're using some references, I would encourage you to try to only line it up and check like proportions and stuff like that when you're feeling hopelessly lost, which I know might be quite often. I've been there myself. How can you control poly edges? There are many ways. Do you have a specific... You're blind. I've been there too, don't worry. It gets easier, I swear. Polygon edges. You can use the Z modeler brush. That's a great way to do it. You can use masking, move brush. Many ways to control edges. I am noticing that we need quite a bit more volume on this chunk. You don't make things chunky, you make them chonky. It's important that you use the correct vernacular when sculpting, so sculptors can understand each other. That's how you know if somebody's like a real sculptor. If they're like, yeah, you need to make that more chunky, you're like, nah, dude. Can't follow that person's advice. Not using the right terms. Alright, and we got this little kind of cut going down the middle through there. Very hard to see, but the light, you guys see that highlight and how it kind of creates that shadow there? Definitely splitting the shape. So look how messy that is. That's nice and messy, right? But that's not important, not in the beginning. Each time you're creating something new, a new strand of hair, an ear, a nose, whatever you're sculpting, you have to think of it in those stages that we looked at before. Large, medium, and small for everything that you do. and it's something that you just kind of get used to. Think of it always in the back of your head. Now, for this piece, I think what I'll do is just create a little polygroup separation here. Just like that, so that when I Z-remesh this with keep groups turned on, it will create a nice clean edge loop between those two polygroups. And then I can use that to my advantage. Someone was just asking about edge control in ZBrush. I'll show you guys something with that here in just a moment. Am I using ZBrush 2020? No, I don't think you can see, because I'm not using it right now, at least. I'm not allowed to stream the beta. Where is it? Title bar. There you go. ZBrush 2019, right up here at the top left corner. I am actually a beta tester, but I am not really allowed to talk about my experience with it. But if you guys are interested in learning more about the beta, there's my internets. If you guys go on over to ZBrush Central, check out this very first link, ZBrush 2020 coming soon. Scroll on through here and there's all sorts of information, video demonstrations on the new tools. I have gotten to play with all of these. I think you guys are going to enjoy the new version of ZBrush a lot when it comes out on November 12th. November 12th. And that is, of course, a free upgrade for all registered ZBrush users. Look forward to it. That's coming up really soon. That's in a week, right? Just a week from today. Get to play with all those fun tools. All right, so we just Z-remeshed this. It did create a bit of a star in the topology down here. I'm going to try to fix it, but I think that just crashed. No? That is not exactly what I was looking for. And I know this bevel will freak out. So I'm actually not going to do what I wanted to show you. Not on this piece, at least. I will show you on another one very quickly because you know what, we got time. So how do we fix something like this? We might as well, right? I'll just split it off. Split it off and make it its own piece so that it's easier to manipulate. And we can recombine these later if we would like, but I would not like. Not right now, at least. But boom, there we go. And that actually, in my opinion, kind of works a little bit better in this case. And this is actually another technique that we can use with our original hair block out to cut some pieces from. So for instance, this is our original hair block out, right? But if there is a specific shape that we're trying to create, we can just use a selection tool like a mask or a selection brush and start to cut that out and separate it, much like what I just did with this piece here. So we took this, we cut it in half, and we just split it up into two separate pieces of geometry. Very easy to do. Yes, November 12th, 1 week from today. How do you call it? I've just been saying ZBrush 2020 in my head. Because ZBrush 2020 is a bit of a mouthful. ZBrush 2020, and you know what? You know what I'm going to call it in the future? Probably just ZBrush. But, you know, for the initial hype, you're going to have to refer to it as the new version, so might as well. Let me show you guys what I was talking about. with splitting off segments from the original block out. So that's what we have here, this original piece with the color on it, the polyframe. So how can we use this? Well, let's go ahead and grab a section here. If you hold Control and Shift, you will activate your selection, slice, trim, and all the other brushes up here. I like to use the selection lasso brush. I find that to be a very nice selection tool. And I'm just going to select this back segment. And I'm actually going to duplicate it because I don't want to completely delete the original that I worked on. And there we go, that's what we got. So what do we want to do with that? We want to get rid of the excess geometry with a delete hidden operation. And start to manipulate that into our new segment. And this is on the back of the head, so I'm actually probably not going to detail this one or spend as much time on it like I did for the others. But we can just start to split this up into even more complexity. We would start to expect maybe a little bit more of a breakup of form. I really like to try to keep the kind of flow of my hair between segments really nice. So even though between this segment here and this segment over here, even though this kind of splits and breaks up, you can still see the original larger silhouette of that shape that we started with. So that's why we work from, that's another reason why we work from large, medium to small. So if I turn all that off, here is the original silhouette that we looked at for the large shape. So as we move into secondary, that still kind of reigns true. There's still that nice flow between those segments. So what I just did back here with this piece for the hair is because it's kind of starting to break up and lose some of that, I kind of just scooted it down here and kind of realign that edge, so we're starting to get this really nice flow through here. So this is another thing that I'm really looking at, not just with hair, but with, you know, all form that I'm creating. And like all things, it becomes kind of second nature after you do it for a while. And it's also extremely messy, so what do we do with extremely messy geometry? We ZBrush it really low. When am I going to start using 2020? When it is officially released. So after the 12th, once it gets officially released, all people on the ZBrush stream team will be able to use the newest version of ZBrush in public eye, so to speak. Are there any major differences between versions? Yes, there are many new tools and things to check out. Again, you guys can check out all the new tools over on the, wherever I put it, the ZBrush Central very first, here, we'll just go back. Right here, very first post. I am, as I said, not allowed to talk about the beta or the tools specifically, so you'll have to read up on them yourselves. In particular, I recommend checking out the History Recall brush and the Extractor brush. I think those are going to be a lot of people's favorite new tools. I think they're really cool, and I myself had a lot of fun getting to use them. I had a lot of fun getting to use all those new tools. Yeah, I can't wait to have it officially released as well. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what everybody creates with all these new awesome tools. It's going to be a good time. I love when a new version of ZBrush comes out. It's like Christmas. All right, so there is one additional segment, but it feels really bland, really boring, right? So what do we like to do with these? And because this is behind the head, we have a little bit more freedom here to kind of craft and control what we're working on. So let's grab our sharp soft brush and start to just create some additional form here. So when I don't know what I'm trying to create, I'm just trying to come up with a few ideas. I like to just start with maybe a simple stroke down the middle, maybe kind of a little bit of a contrast to that, give a concavity, kind of play with that. I'm kind of liking the direction here, so I think I'll kind of build up the form a little bit more on one side. I'm liking that. Let's maybe depress it on the other. And we're getting something pretty cool here. So let's refine it. We like the direction, the block out, the large shape, right? How do we refine it? Let's use maybe some pinch or some mech brushes to kind of split that up a bit more. And that step there might be a bit too steep. I'm just kind of looking at that in the silhouette. I think that's maybe a bit too strong. So I think what I'll do is soften this side here. Just very gently. Start to push that in. A little bit of trim. Awesome. Nice and clean. The gallery models look awesome. Yeah. Mine should be on there. I don't have it pulled up. I think I have the link here somewhere. One second. Yes. I couldn't find the link for this on the website to the gallery, so I'm going to share this in chat with you guys so you guys can go check out all the models as well. But yes, so this was my piece. This is what I got to work on and create for the beta. Just kind of a dragon. I got to play around with a lot of the new tools for the new version of ZBrush on this cool guy. He was a lot of fun to work on. There's a bunch of different color variations that I created using some of the new tools as well. But I'll be posting the rest of those on ArtStation tomorrow after my brain has a second to cool down. I just got back in yesterday from Boston, and I'm going on another trip this weekend. Just all sorts of crazy work lately, and moving around. But yes, back to streaming this month, so that's nice. Again, if you guys are new around here, this is the Pixologic ZBrush channel. My name is Ben, or Polygon around these parts. And I will be streaming next Tuesday. Same time, same place. 6 p.m. Eastern US time, or 3 p.m. on the West Coast, which is, I think, what they have it listed as. Beautiful. Beautiful hair. Slowly, right? Like I said, hair takes a long time. It's something that I typically get into a really nice flow with as I continue to build up more and more of the shapes. Obviously quite a bit more complex over on the left side of her face. But with time, it'll start to come together a lot more. And I think, where did our stray strands go? A couple stray strands right there. Stray strands, we didn't really get to do too much with those, but that is maybe something that we can look at a little bit more in a future stream. But I think that is where we are going to end it for tonight. So thank you so much for coming and hanging out, everybody. Again, if you guys want to check out any of my stuff, my YouTube channel is the Polygon. You can just Google it. It's great. There's good stuff on there. I'm really selling it. My ArtStation, it's all the same. If you guys are interested in checking out any of my brushes, materials, courses, yada yada yada, that is my Gumroad, gumroad.com/Polygon. I'll pop a link in chat for you, cool kids, and make sure you check out the new features for the ZBrush beta. Again, that is coming out 1 week from today for the official release, November 12th. Let me make sure that is correct. Yes, November 12th. Get ready. That's going to be lots of fun. But until then, you guys have a fantastic rest of your night. I hope to maybe see you over on my YouTube channel or on the Pixologic channel for my next stream next Tuesday. All right, until then, I'll see you guys around.